I knew I was screwed the moment I opened that email and saw the subject line, Leadership Development Pairing Action Required. No, hello. No, how's the family? Just corporate dry rot dressed as initiative. I've held national security clearance longer than this kid's been potty trained. For 23 years I've sat behind locked biometric doors, decoding redacted briefings and scrubbing missile simulations from systems that don't even exist on paper. I've written threat models that would make your spine leak. And now I'm mentoring a Wharton grad who still has college sweat stains on his Patagonia vest. The email said he was the CFO's nephew. CFO's nephew in all caps like that was supposed to explain everything. Promising leadership potential. It read, finance track with strong strategic aptitude. Yeah. You know what else has a finance track and strong strategic aptitude? Ponzi scheme. I scroll down and see his name. Bryce. No last name. Just Bryce. Like he's Madonna or some sort of high-yield bond messiah. And just like that, my calendar lights up. 1:1 with Bryce, intro session. Friday, 9 a.m. Mandatory. I lean back in my chair and stare at the ceiling tile I once pried loose to stash a flash drive that could have taken down 3 hostile networks. I remember doing that on the same day our firm landed the DoD contract to simulate radar interference over classified Arctic sectors. I'd spent 72 straight hours reconfiguring counter-decryption protocols. That was the same week my ex-wife texted that she was done competing with ghosts and passwords. Now I was being asked to teach Bryce how we tag restricted modules. First meeting hits like a punchline. Bryce struts in with all the humility of a man who's never changed his own oil. So, he says, clapping his hands like a youth pastor before a PowerPoint, I figure I'll shadow you this week, and then next week I can start making some process updates. I ask what his background is. Oh, he laughs. I wrote a white paper at Wharton about defense sector inefficiencies. My professor said it was like super disruptive. Disruptive. Jesus. He talks fast, with the kind of confidence you only get when no one's told you you're wrong. Honestly, he says, spinning in the chair like a toddler on Red Bull. You guys are running these assets like it's still 2005. The whole radar architecture is bloated. Like, it's basically just satellites anyway. Right? Right then, I felt a migraine blooming behind my eye. A slow, red thundercloud pressing against the inside of my skull. But I smiled, nodded, made a note in the manila folder I'd started that morning. Labeled it Bryce Containment Strategy. Underlined it twice. The worst part? He wasn't stupid. Stupid people are predictable. Bryce was confident and wrong, which is a nuclear combo when paired with inherited power. He had just enough knowledge to get invited to meetings, but not enough sense to realize when he was detonating logic. Later that week, he barged into a secured lab and asked why his badge wouldn't open the secret rooms. Said it jokingly like secret rooms was a Halloween theme. The 2 engineers inside, both with Tier 3 clearances and non-disclosure lifers, just blinked at him like he'd farted during a funeral. I had to play it off like he was auditing access procedures. I added another page to the folder that night. You want to know the real kicker? HR CC'd me on a development feedback form 2 days later. Said they'd love a monthly progress summary on Bryce's leadership evolution. Evolution, like he's some goddamn Pokemon. I wanted to reply with a single sentence. The moment he learns how 2-factor authentication works, I'll consider him semi-sentient. But I didn't push back. Not yet. Instead, I started watching, tracking, mapping where Bryce was being allowed to fumble without consequence. What doors opened for him that wouldn't budge for seasoned analysts without pedigree or politics. I charted the department heads who smirked when he spoke, and the ones who winced. I kept receipts, call logs, emails, copies of project proposals he created, but actually sourced from legacy decks. I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing an autopsy. Bryce stood in front of the whiteboard like he was pitching crypto to orphans. He'd somehow finagled the daily 10-15 security sync into a collaborative knowledge share. And now the room, normally a vault of grim-faced engineers and cleared analysts, was watching this overconfident finance larva draw what looked like a lopsided donut labeled Legacy Radar Blob. Okay, he said, clicking his Apple Pencil like it was a detonator. So radar is basically just satellites, right? A silence fell over the room so thick you could have laminated it. One of the contractors, Eli, ex-Navy, 14 tours of God knows where, blinked slowly, like he was trying to reboot his soul. 2 chairs over, Mina actually coughed into her coffee, and I swear it sounded like she was choking on the word idiot. But Bryce didn't notice. Bryce never noticed. It's all electromagnetic, he went on, proudly sketching arrows between clouds and a stick-figure tank. Satellites bounce signals off stuff, radar does the same, so redundancy. What I'm saying is we could offload a lot of this groundside crap and lean into what Space Force is already doing. I didn't respond. I just let the silence stretch, savoring it like the moment before a car crash. Then, calmly, I pulled my notepad from my lap and wrote down the date, the room, the meeting ID, and one direct quote. Radar equals satellites. We're bloated. I underlined it 3 times. Let me be clear. This wasn't just a stupid idea, it was a dangerous one. If someone in procurement got a hold of that nugget and believed it, we were talking about downgrading essential systems, rerouting federal money, and triggering a chain of audits that could make Enron look like a hoopsie. The satellites we do use operate on a different layer of command entirely, and the radar systems Bryce thought were bloated were actively tracking threats in 6 zones, 3 of which we weren't technically allowed to admit existed. But what chilled me wasn't the stupidity. It was the room's reaction. Because no one said a damn word. No one corrected him. Not Mina. Not Eli. Not me. I caught eyes with Hector from Systems. He gave me the tiniest shrug, the corporate version of you say something. But I didn't. And I knew why. Everyone in that room had heard the same rumor. Bryce wasn't just a Wharton grad. He was the CFO's golden boy. Fast-tracked. Untouchable. Which meant his mistakes weren't going to be corrected. They were going to be justified. Later that afternoon, I got a ping from the CFO's executive assistant. Subject line, strategic radar reframe? Apparently, Bryce had floated his satellites over radar pitch during the weekly budget forecasting. Said he was just thinking big. Wanted to know if we had documentation that supported a pivot. Pivot. As if we were selling sneakers, not safeguarding the eastern seaboard from unauthorized flyovers. I didn't reply. I made another note. CFO's office entertaining radar cuts. Bryce language. Reframe, redundancy, lean. The phrase lean made my skin itch. Nothing says we're about to ruin everything, like someone with a business degree telling you to lean your surveillance infrastructure. 2 days later, I spotted Bryce in the hallway with Scott from corporate strategy. They were laughing. Bryce said something about trimming the fat, and Scott actually fist bumped him. I walked right past them like I didn't exist. Because I didn't. Not in the eyes of people who mattered. I was legacy code in a world obsessed with disruption. The janitor of secrets. Invisible until something broke. Which meant I could watch, could record, could prepare. See, I'd been playing dead for months. Quiet, courteous, dependable. But now I started poking around. Not loudly, just softly. I reread the clearance trails. I rechecked what Bryce had access to versus what he thought he had access to. And I found the cracks. So many cracks. You ever watch someone juggle knives they don't know are real? That's what it felt like. And I wasn't gonna stop him. I was gonna hold the curtain open while he did IT. Started with a paperclip. One of those smooth silver bastards Bryce kept flicking against his teeth during our Monday ops sync like he was chewing cud made of arrogance. He leaned back in his ergonomic chair, the one he'd requisitioned from executive overflow, and dropped his latest brainstorm with the same confidence a toddler shows before diving into traffic. So, I'm gonna need admin access, he said, casual as ordering lunch. I paused mid-scroll through the radar telemetry logs. Admin to what? Bryce grinned, like I'd asked if water was wet. Everything. There it was. The idiot's holy grail. I didn't even flinch. Just leaned forward, folded my hands, and said, "You do realize that admin access in this department triggers a clearance sync with DC?" He waved me off. Yeah, but like, it's just code, right? I just want to streamline some of the onboarding flow. It's all pretty archaic. I couldn't even reset my own password without calling Brenda. Poor Brenda. 62, 2 years from retirement, and now apparently Bryce's personal tech slave. She'd called me that morning in tears because he tried to override her MFA protocols, saying they slowed down innovation. I nodded slowly and opened a new page in the manila folder now labeled Bryce Chain of Custody. Then I wrote, in neat block letters, 9:42 a.m., requests admin access to everything. Motivation, streamline onboarding. Later that day, I got a Teams ping from Bryce with a file labeled Clearance Reorg version 2.0. The PowerPoint was a war crime. Slide 1. Why we're doing this. A stock photo of a puzzle piece glowing in a man's hand. Slide 2. Problems with current protocols. Listed things like too many logins, unnecessary gatekeeping, and trust should be assumed. Slide 4. He skipped 3. Solution. Access, control. I stared at that one for a full minute. He'd flipped the equation. Access greater than control. It wasn't just idiocy. It was weaponized incompetence. I didn't respond. I saved the file, encrypted it, and added it to the external archive I'd started storing on my personal air-gapped drive. Not because I planned to leak anything yet, but because I needed a record. When the dominoes started falling, I wasn't going to be the guy blamed for not warning anyone. I'd be the guy who watched it happen with time-stamped evidence. The real kicker came Thursday. Bryce barges into my office. Uninvited, as always. Wearing that smug startup swagger and a hoodie that read "Move fast, break stuff." The irony was apparently lost on him. "Hey," he said, like we were old buddies. I submitted a revision to the clearance form, made it like way more intuitive. I blinked. "You revised the clearance form?" "Yeah," he beamed. "I got rid of all that outdated classification jargon, replaced it with color codes. Green is basic, yellow is intermediate, red is spicy." Spicy. He called top secret clearance spicy. I swear I felt my soul leave my body and tap out. "That form is a federal document," I said, slowly. "It's governed by executive order. You can't just rebrand nuclear protocols like it's a Taco Bell menu." He actually laughed. "You're hilarious, man. No, but for real, it's way easier now. Just needs your final pass." I already sent it to legal. I didn't say anything. I just opened my drawer, pulled out a fresh notepad, and wrote, 2:13 p.m., Bryce submitted unauthorized clearance form revision. Color-coded system. Red equals spicy. That night I stayed late. Everyone else had gone home. Even janitorial had clocked out. The hum of the servers was the only sound left, a low mechanical heartbeat pulsing through the dim light. I pulled up Bryce's access logs. He'd tried to enter the compliance directory twice. Blocked both times. His credentials didn't qualify. But he'd tried, and that was enough. I cross-referenced his timestamp with the auto-notify I'd set up in a hidden script 2 years ago. Bryce triggered it. Sloppy hands on systems he didn't understand. I didn't report it. I just added another line. 6:19 p.m., unauthorized access attempt. Logged. Pattern emerging. Some people go nuclear when threatened. Others stab in the dark. Me? I document. I wait. I let the heat simmer until the pot rattles off the stove. Because I knew how this game ended. Bryce thought he was playing Monopoly with house money. I knew he was leaning over a Jenga tower built out of live grenades. The moment I realized I was trapped in a corporate farce and not a defense agency was during the Tuesday leadership sync, 8:30 a.m. sharp, when the CFO clicked to slide 6 and said, "I swear to God. Now let's give it up for Bryce and his truly innovative vision." And the room clapped. They actually clapped. Not one of those polite three-pat pity claps either. This was full-blown bravo, young king. Applause from people who knew better. Men and women with enough security clearance to make senators nervous. Nodding along like Bryce had just solved the Israeli-Palestinian conflict with a Canva template. On the screen, a pie chart, titled Access Efficiency Optimization. I stared at it, stunned. Not because of what it said, but because I recognized it. That chart wasn't his. It was mine. Well, not mine exactly. It came from a threat assessment I'd put together with Mina and Hector 2 years ago, a buried internal-only slide in a classified security audit. We'd used it to prove how excessive badge access during contractor rotations could create exploitable gaps. Took us 6 months of pulling logs and tracking ingress behavior to build the damn thing. It was ugly, functional, redacted 6 ways from Sunday. And now here it was. Polished, colorful, Bryce-ified. He'd swapped the red, unauthorized entry risk section for a green wedge labeled opportunity space. Even added a smiley face emoji on the legend. I scanned the room. Hector. Stiff smile, arms crossed. He recognized it too. Mina. Staring down at her tablet, lips tight. But half the table? Nodding like they'd found the next Elon Musk in a zip-up fleece. Jen from public sector gave an enthusiastic love that framing. Jamal from innovation muttered, "We've needed this for years." Like the PowerPoint had absolved him of every stupid access request he'd rubber-stamped. And there at the head of the table, CFO Vincent Lambert. Gray suit, striped tie, teeth that never quite touched. Beaming like a man watching his golden retriever do calculus. He leaned forward and said, "This is what next-gen leadership looks like. Taking initiative. Rethinking legacy bloat. Bryce, walk us through your thought process." Bryce stood up like he was about to accept a Grammy. Clicked his clicker. Next slide. A stock photo of 2 hands shaking over a digital lock icon. "Thanks, Uncle Vince," he said. Because apparently we weren't even pretending anymore. He launched into a rambling monologue about intelligent decentralization and building trust over permission. He compared outdated clearance structures to sandbags on a jetpack. Said our current protocol was like built for Cold War spies, not agile thinkers. When someone asked how this impacted our federal compliance status, he blinked and said, "Oh, I figured legal would figure that part out." That got a laugh. A laugh. I wrote another note in the folder. 8:52 a.m. Bryce presents plagiarized clearance slide. CFO praises vision. Room response. 60% claps, 20% quiet, 20% looks of silent horror. Later that day, in the hallway, Hector muttered as we passed the break room, "We've officially entered clown mode." I didn't reply, just tapped the folder under my arm and kept walking. You know what they say about power? That it doesn't corrupt, it reveals. Bryce wasn't just some idiot nephew tagging along on a summer internship. He was a test balloon. A walking probe sent to see how much stupidity this place could absorb without popping. And judging by the applause, a whole damn lot. That night I went back through the old audit files and screen-capped the original chart. Time-stamped it. Labeled it. Source document. Slide 6 theft. Then I wrote one final line before powering down. This is no longer about mentorship. This is a controlled demolition. And Bryce? He was lighting the fuse. The document came in on a Thursday morning, tucked between a breakfast burrito and a migraine. Bryce, in all his cargo pants confidence, had submitted his first independent operational summary, a glorified spreadsheet duct-taped to a procurement memo, labeled in bold blue font, System Efficiency Consolidation Proposal, Draft V Final _Final 2, PPTX. I opened it half expecting clip art. Slide 2 hit like a wet slap. He'd labeled our primary radar telemetry relay operations as budgetary overhead. Overhead, like it was toner cartridges. Like tracking submarine movement over the Arctic Trench was optional. I stared at the screen for a full minute, not blinking, just breathing, letting the dread settle into my spine like cold coffee into carpet. You ever watch someone juggle chainsaws while insisting they read a TED Talk about it once? That was this. But the real horror? That report had already been attached to a procurement request. Line 42. Tucked between server dehumidifier refresh and VPN endpoint updates. He'd filed a recommendation to phase out legacy ground-based radar nodes and explore satellite-based redundancy for fiscal optimization. In the remarks column, non-critical systems reviewable for sunset. Sunset. He called live threat tracking radar systems reviewable for sunset. That line alone, if misread by the wrong auditor or read by the wrong one, could trigger an inquiry from half a dozen departments that don't have public names. One of those nodes was tied to a multi-year classified bid extension, which itself was tagged under a federal protective contract with the kind of language that makes lawyers sweat through their shoes. And Bryce just dropped it into a spreadsheet like he was deleting an old Dropbox folder. I didn't shout, didn't email, didn't Slack. I opened the shared drive and downloaded every file with his name on it, duplicated it, encrypted it, tagged it. Then I walked downstairs, past the break room where he was showing someone a meme about middle managers being replaced by AI, and used the secure printer in logistics. 2 copies, watermarked, time-stamped, page by page. I marked them with a red pen like I was grading a child's attempt at espionage. Because this wasn't just incompetence anymore. This was breach territory. I filed the documents under a folder labeled Precipice Events. Then I sat back, sipped the burnt black sludge our office calls coffee, and waited. At 2:43 p.m., I checked the contract ID tied to line 42. Sure enough, DPN 3947 Gamma, an active procurement vehicle flagged, critical NSC oversight. Buried in subsection 3.2 was the clause I feared, operational integrity audit triggered by structural change to surveillance classifications. Bryce's document wasn't just stupid. It was a tripwire. He didn't know it. The CFO didn't know it. But I did. That line item was a live grenade, and the pin was already halfway out. I watched the internal approval workflow update. Green check, pending review. I didn't touch it. I just screen-capped the chain, tucked it into the archive. Mina passed by my desk on her way to the elevators. "You see that report?" she asked under her breath, not stopping. "Yeah," I muttered. "I saw it." She paused. "We saying anything?" I looked her in the eye. "Not yet. Because here's the thing about men like Bryce, they don't fall from grace. They trip over it, smiling all the way down. And I wasn't going to stop him. I was going to let gravity do its job.at exactly 5:43 p.m. I saw it, that cursed red dot blinking in the corner of my monitor like a sniper scope. One new message, classified. Clearance flag notice. I clicked it. The subject line read, auto-escalate, DPN 3947, Gamma. Classification misalignment detected. Body of the email was cold and surgical, the way only military systems talk when they're about to make someone's life very, very inconvenient. Your recent submission, ref, line 42, contains language inconsistent with active DoD clearance parameters. Automatic hold initiated pending compliance review. Escalated to audit cycle per section 3.2b. Response window 48 hours. Contact Office of Defense Systems Integrity with clarifying documentation. Translation: you just tripped the Pentagon's third wire alarm. Congratulations, idiot. I leaned back, hands off the keyboard, and stared at that one word in bold. Auto-escalate. Bryce's sunset note, the one that labeled our radar grid as non-critical, had triggered the tripwire. The one I knew existed because I built the mapping doc 3 years ago during a hellish contract alignment between our firm and ODNI. I knew exactly how many words it took to turn an internal memo into a federal audit. Apparently, it took 4, reviewable for fiscal sunset. Bryce had wrapped a grenade in buzzwords and tossed it straight into a procurement file. And the Pentagon, bless them, didn't miss it. I didn't forward the email, didn't react, didn't even blink. Instead, I printed it. 2 copies. One for the folder. One for the fireproof lockbox in my garage. At 6:02 p.m., my desk phone rang, an inside line. CFO Vincent. I picked up, slow and calm. "Hey," he said, voice breezy like we were talking about golf. "Just saw the Pentagon kicked back some junk, probably some auto thing. These systems are ancient, right? Bryce mentioned something about reclassifying radar support. You were looped in, yeah." "I saw it," I said. "Nothing else." CFO chuckled. "Well, I mean, they're not gonna actually care. Let's just get legal to plug whatever boilerplate they want. It's all CYA anyway. This won't go anywhere." My jaw tensed. I could almost hear the whiskey in his voice. "They won't care," he repeated. I wanted to say, "You think the Pentagon doesn't care when a civilian subcontractor labels encrypted defense telemetry as a budget footnote? You think they won't care applies to people who've redacted their own birthdays?" But I didn't. I just said, "Sure. We'll see." He hung up, probably smiling, probably pouring himself another 2 fingers of oblivious bourbon, proud of the nephew who just greased the skids of federal disaster. At 6:17 p.m., I checked the server logs. The DPN 3947 node was frozen. Procurement queue locked. Internal timestamp matched the email. The Pentagon didn't wait for clarification. They'd already flipped the switch. I didn't text Bryce, didn't warn legal. I sat there in the quiet hum of pre-implosion, watching emails bounce like popcorn in a microwave, knowing every thread now bore the mark of death. The automated audit tag, the traceable metadata, the irreversible paper trail. Bryce had stepped on the landmine, and all I'd done was let it beep. At 6:17 p.m. on the dot. The system screamed. Every terminal logged out. Every monitor flashed red. All operations on DPN 3947 Gamma halted. Pending investigative freeze. No warning. No countdown. Just a sudden surgical lockdown that hit the building like a heart attack mid-breath. By 6:18, the phones were howling. Not ringing, howling. Desperate, glitchy shrieks from direct lines that weren't supposed to be used unless a contractor vanished, a facility got breached, or, in this case, someone had triggered a federal deadman switch by classifying a top-tier radar system as an overhead expense. I stood in the corner of the main floor, mug in hand, sipping the same cold bitter coffee I'd microwaved twice that day, and watched it unfold. Bryce was at his desk, or more accurately, beside it, hands frozen in the air like he was defusing a bomb with no training. The lights above him flickered as the system rerouted power to core access points, shutting down peripheral nodes. A thick wave of blue screen crashes followed, row by row, like dominoes wired into a doomsday clock. The kid looked like someone had just unplugged his soul. Colorless, hollow-eyed, that smug, bulletproof MBA grin, gone. Replaced with a slack-jawed panic that didn't even know where to begin being sorry. "Why did everything just go red?" he whispered to no one. Behind him, Jen from public sector was mid-scream into her headset, trying to reassure a DoD liaison that it was probably a glitch. Jamal from innovation was sweating through his button-down like he'd just run laps in a microwave. I could hear someone throwing up in the executive washroom. Mina looked at me across the room. No words, just a slow blink and the faintest nod. And me? I didn't say a goddamn thing. Didn't run. Didn't panic. I just reached into my desk drawer, pulled out the envelope labeled "If It Happens," and placed it gently on my keyboard. Inside, a printed thread of every document Bryce had touched, signed, emailed, or butchered, line-itemed with dates, quotes, metadata, and escalation tags. I'd even included his plagiarized pie chart from the leadership sync, because why not bury him with his own PowerPoint? At 6:23, the CFO burst onto the floor, tie loosened, hair wild, and voice already cracking. "What the hell is going on?" Everyone stopped, or tried to, because at that exact moment, a new message pinged across the building's secure Slack. "Do DSI bulk notice all systems tied to DPN 3947. Gamma are subject to immediate federal inquiry. Suspension in place. Audit in progress. Do not delete, edit, or transmit related materials. Non-compliance will result in prosecution." The CFO read it twice, then turned to Bryce like a man watching his house sink into a tar pit. "You told me you cleared it." Bryce didn't answer. His mouth opened, closed, opened again, but nothing came out. I thought about saying something. Maybe he thought radar was just satellites. Maybe you said they wouldn't care, but I didn't. Instead, I calmly stood, sipped my coffee, and walked to the compliance printer. Fed in my envelope, punched in the secure delivery code, sealed the audit packet like a man mailing a wedding invitation, if the wedding was between negligence and a federal takedown. The best part? No one noticed me. In all the noise, all the chaos, I was just another middle-aged man in a cheap shirt, quietly doing his job. But inside, I was still in a way I hadn't been in years. Because this wasn't revenge. This was gravity. And I'd simply watched the apple fall. The first headline hit before sunrise. Major defense contractor under emergency federal review. Pentagon investigating internal clearance breach. By 8:05 a.m., we weren't a company anymore. We were a crime scene with HR. Phones lit up like a Vegas casino on fire. Voicemails filled faster than the servers could archive them. Legal went into triage mode, barking at interns to pull everything from Q3 onward, while scrubbing Slack threads they should have deleted 6 months ago. IT locked down remote access. The parking garage was half empty before 9. The brave ones stayed, either too oblivious to run or too guilty to bolt. At 9:42, the elevators opened and they stepped out. Pentagon auditors. 2 of them. Suits so dark they absorbed light. They didn't speak much, didn't have to. They moved through the hallways like radiation. Silent, precise, inevitable. One held a slim laptop. The other carried a leather folder marked DDSI/INTR/A1, a level of classification that doesn't even get acronyms. They asked no questions. They already knew where to look. Within 20 minutes, they were in the server room. Within 30, Bryce's access logs were mirrored and sealed. By 10, his laptop was confiscated. By 10:03, Bryce was gone. Not fired. Not confronted. Escorted. 2 men in dark polos walked him out like he was a tech intern whose badge expired. No raised voices, no scene, no email blast. Just erased, like a typo in a final draft. I saw it through the break room window. Bryce walking slowly toward the black SUV, carrying nothing but a half-zipped backpack and a stunned expression. Like he still didn't understand which part of non-critical systems meant you detonated national security. He looked up once, scanned the windows. His eyes landed on mine. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I just sipped my coffee. Later that day, the CFO lost his mind in legal. I heard it through the walls. Sounded like a man trying to scream underwater. Half rage, half panic, all consequences. "This is insane," he shouted. It was one-line item. His voice cracked on the word line, like it had betrayed him personally. Someone tried to calm him down, mentioning that the audit had moved from review to forensic inquiry, that the procurement freeze was now public, that the stock was tanking. Investors had seen the headlines. Retired generals were asking questions. Oversight committee aides were circling like vultures in suits. Our quarterly call was postponed indefinitely, and our largest subcontractor filed a request to pause all active collaboration, pending clarity of liability. I never got called into any of it. Not once. No late-night emails. No finger-pointing. Because every document Bryce touched had a digital twin, safely stored, time-stamped, and backed by memos I'd quietly CC'd to compliance. Every time he made a change, I logged it. Every meeting he redefined security as optional. I wrote it down. Hell, I even included the slide where he called top-secret radar spicy. When the Pentagon team scanned the logs, my name was a surgical thread. Consistent, cautious, clear. I wasn't the whistleblower. I didn't need to be. I was the shadow they tripped over. The kind of employee who disappears into the system until the system needs a scapegoat and a savior. But this time, I was neither. I was simply clean. At 6:17 p.m., exactly 24 hours after the initial lockdown, I walked past the CFO's office. The blinds were shut. His coat was gone. A receptionist was crying while unplugging a phone charger. In the hallway, I passed Mina. She didn't say anything, just bumped her shoulder gently against mine, then kept walking. I went back to my desk, opened a folder, typed one last line in the audit trail. Outcome: integrity preserved, assets secured, Bryce removed, audit survived. Then I hit save, closed the file, and leaned back in my chair. The building was crumbling around me, but I was untouched, because I didn't build the trap. I just made sure it stayed visible. and waited for someone arrogant enough to step right in. They wanted to believe it was sabotage. Legal combed the logs like bloodhounds, desperate for a mole, a leak, a malicious actor they could point at and say, "This was done to us." But there was no one. Just a slow chain of stupid decisions, uncorrected because nobody wanted to insult the CFO's family tree. Bryce hadn't been set up. He'd been handed a loaded weapon and cheered on as he cleaned his ears with the barrel. Every mistake was his. Every document bore his login. Every change he made was flagged, not by some shadowy hacker, but by the very systems he wanted to sunset. He didn't trip a wire. He wrapped himself in them and did jumping jacks. And me? I was just the guy who watched, who listened, who printed, who waited, because I knew this place, knew its rhythms, knew exactly how far a lie could stretch before it cracked, and how deep a smile could hide incompetence. I didn't lift a finger to push Bryce off the ledge. I simply made sure no one moved the railing. In the final report, the one quietly shared between Defense Oversight and our executive board, my name appears 3 times. Not as a whistleblower, as a witness. And that was enough. The CFO stepped back 3 weeks later. Not fired, not shamed, just reassigned to a strategic advisory role in an office with no staff and no inbox. Word around the building is he's being bought out quietly before the next quarterly call. Bryce? Gone. Not even a LinkedIn update. His badge history archived and sealed. It's like he never existed. A ghost with a PowerPoint addiction. There was no apology, no thank you, no redemption arc, just silence. But silence can be powerful if you're the one who chooses it. I stayed, not because I wanted to, not because they asked, but because someone had to keep the lights on while the dust settled. Someone who knew which cables not to cut. Someone who doesn't confuse clearance with competence. They never called me a hero. They didn't dare. Heroes cause stories. I leave evidence. 3 weeks after the audit closed, I got a message. No subject line. Just a secure text ping from a Pentagon contact I hadn't heard from in 7 years. The same guy who once told me over scotch, "Sometimes we need janitors more than generals." His message read, "Good catch. That's it. No fanfare. No parade. Just 2 words from a man who knows what it means when silence speaks louder than alarms." I finished my coffee bitter, burnt, somehow both stale and scalding, and stared out at the parking lot. Another storm was coming. It always does. But I wasn't scared, because I didn't burn the system. I just watched it rot, and waited for it to collapse under its own bloated, arrogant weight. I didn't need revenge. I needed patience. And gravity did the rest.